something happened that no one, especially not in Washington, expected. 10 African nations stood up, looked the most powerful country on earth in the eye, and said one word: no. It wasn't just a policy disagreement. It wasn't about small grants or diplomatic misunderstandings. This was a direct rejection of Donald Trump himself, a man known for his deals, his dominance, and his expectations of loyalty. But this time, his billion-dollar packages, military pacts, exclusive trade incentives, and flashy promises were all met with cold, calculated defiance. From West to East Africa, from mineral-rich territories to agricultural powerhouses, these nations didn't just reject the deals, they exposed them. They saw the hidden terms, the unspoken conditions, and the veiled threats dressed up as partnership. And one by one, they walked away. So what really happened behind the scenes? And why are these countries suddenly choosing sovereignty over submission? In this video, let's break it down, country by country, strategy by strategy. Number 10. Ghana. The rejection wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It thundered through the streets of Accra. When Donald Trump's administration unveiled a $500 million infrastructure and aid package aimed at deepening bilateral ties, the initial optics suggested generosity: roads, energy investments, and data centers. On paper, it seemed like a golden opportunity, but Ghana didn't read it as an offer. They read it as a trap, because buried within the fine print were conditions that struck at the heart of Ghana's sovereignty. Washington wanted more than friendship. They wanted leverage. The deal required Ghana to terminate several Belt and Road infrastructure agreements with China, grant exclusive access to American naval forces at its key ports in Tema and Takoradi, and even share intelligence on Chinese and Russian movements across West Africa. But this wasn't 1982, and Ghana wasn't desperate. Government insiders leaked the documents within 48 hours. Civil society exploded. University students marched with banners reading, "We built Kwame Nkrumah's dream, not a Pentagon pipeline." Think tanks, opposition leaders, and even pro-government figures labeled it what it was: economic blackmail disguised as diplomacy. The government's response was clinical: rejection. Not a renegotiation, not a delay. A flat, direct number. And they didn't stop there. Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a fiery statement reaffirming its commitment to non-alignment and its right to pursue strategic partnerships without foreign interference. Public sentiment matched the government's resolve. Protests were not just against the U.S. deal. They were celebrations of self-determination. Africa Chooses Africa became more than a chant. It became a national mood. And what came next proved Ghana had prepared for this moment. Days after the rejection, Ghana doubled its involvement in the African Continental Free Trade Area and signed a new development framework with China, focusing on infrastructure, education, and mineral processing. What did Ghana lose? Possibly some U.S. goodwill. What did it gain? Its spine and its story. Number 9. Nigeria. If Ghana's defiance was bold, Nigeria's was earth-shaking. The United States believed it had leverage. Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation, the largest oil exporter on the continent, and the gateway to West Africa's economic corridor. In Washington's view, the offer made to Nigeria was the crown jewel of Trump's Africa reset, a multi-billion-dollar investment in pipelines, refineries, and digital infrastructure. But the devil wasn't in the details. It was in the conditions. U.S. energy giants were to gain majority control over 50% of Nigeria's oil production zones, including profit sharing, export logistics, and contract arbitration. Nigeria was also expected to halt negotiations with BRICS energy funds and cease its bid to refine crude domestically under a new national policy. The assumption in D.C. was that Nigeria would fold, that poverty, corruption, and political dysfunction would make it a predictable client state. They were wrong. What they got instead was a national broadcast from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu declaring the offer economic recolonization in a business suit. He accused Washington of trying to repaint exploitation as investment, and he wasn't alone. Within hours, lawmakers from both ruling and opposition parties echoed his words. "Nigeria is not a well you can rent," one MP said. Protests broke out in Abuja and Lagos, not against America, but for Nigeria. Nationalist slogans, student rallies, and editorial campaigns all underscored one idea: control over our oil is non-negotiable. And just like Ghana, Nigeria had a plan B. It inked a new multilateral energy agreement with Russia and Brazil under the South-South Sovereign Energy Pact, allowing African countries to refine, not just extract, their natural resources. Washington retaliated with whispers of sanctions, but Nigeria stood firm. Number 8, South Africa. While Ghana rejected manipulation and Nigeria resisted resource seizure, South Africa said no to isolation. The Trump administration's offer was shrewd. Billions in trade incentives, high-tech surveillance tools, and even next-gen military training. But the condition? Abandon BRICS, the powerful alliance with Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and instead, align exclusively with U.S. geopolitical interests. To South Africa, the move was not just offensive, it was insulting. BRICS wasn't a trade club. It was a statement of independence, a strategic lifeline, and for many South Africans, a symbol of post-apartheid empowerment on the global stage. President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation with surgical precision. "We will not leave our allies for temporary favors. We are not a pawn in your chessboard. We are a sovereign republic with a global vision." His speech ignited a wave of national pride. Universities organized forums on African multipolarity. Activists staged BRICS solidarity marches. Journalists flooded the airwaves with one dominant headline: Africa chooses multilateralism over manipulation. And within a week, BRICS responded with open arms. New investment flows, technology sharing, and a landmark cultural diplomacy agreement were fast-tracked. BRICS member states reaffirmed their commitment to South Africa's development goals, providing alternatives that the U.S. never anticipated. But here's the real shift. South Africa's decision didn't isolate it, it connected it. More African nations began signaling interest in joining BRICS, or forming new regional coalitions that excluded the West's traditional influence. What began as Trump's attempt to fracture BRICS instead made it stronger and more African. Number 7. Ethiopia. Ethiopia's response came not in whispers, but in decisive action. The Trump administration's offer seemed like a dream package for any security-conscious nation. It included cutting-edge drone systems, surveillance satellites, encrypted military communications, and guaranteed Pentagon support against domestic insurgencies. But beneath the glossy surface, the proposal read more like an occupation blueprint than a partnership. The catch? Ethiopia had to become the permanent East African drone base for U.S. operations. The fine print revealed staggering demands: exclusive rights over certain air corridors, real-time access to Ethiopia's air traffic control systems, and, perhaps most alarming, authorization for the U.S. military to operate on Ethiopian soil without prior clearance. Even worse, the agreement would have given Washington remote access to surveillance feeds not only within Ethiopia, but across neighboring nations like Eritrea, Somalia, and Sudan. In effect, Ethiopia would become both a surveillance hub and a launch pad for U.S. operations across the Horn of Africa. However, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed didn't flinch. "We are not a subcontractor for global policing," he told Parliament. "This is legalized espionage disguised as an alliance." Within 24 hours, the deal was dead. And what followed wasn't silence. It was a wave of national support. The hashtag #NoBasesNoBosses exploded across social media. Influencers, political commentators, and university students flooded Twitter and TikTok with a single message: Ethiopia is not for sale. Abiy's government pivoted instantly. It accelerated a joint drone manufacturing project with Turkey, announced a national defense research fund, and launched a campaign to modernize its air defense systems using local engineers and diaspora scientists. Ethiopia didn't just reject American drones, it built its own wings. Number 6. Kenya. Where Ethiopia said no to foreign military control, Kenya said no to legal domination disguised as development. The Trump administration had lined up what looked like a dream deal: $3 billion in funding for ports, highways, and smart cities under a new East Africa infrastructure pact. Nairobi's media even hailed it briefly as a Marshall Plan for the Kenyan century. But behind the scenes, legal advisors raised alarms. The deal included an astonishing clause: any economic dispute arising from the projects, be it overpricing, contracts, or labor, would be adjudicated in U.S. courts under U.S. law. That meant Kenya's legal sovereignty over its own infrastructure would be nullified. And that wasn't all. A secondary clause pushed for the privatization of national assets under the U.S.-approved intermediaries, essentially turning Kenya's roads, ports, and even parts of its energy grid into foreign-controlled property. President William Ruto acted fast. In a nationally televised address, he declared, "We may borrow, but we do not mortgage our institutions. Our Constitution is not up for negotiation." His tone was calm but firm, a clear rejection wrapped in resolve. Public reaction was immediate. The Kenya Law Society, judicial reform groups, and business federations all issued joint declarations. The phrase, "modern colonialism in legal form," headlined editorials from Nairobi to Mombasa. But Kenya didn't retreat into isolation. It recalibrated. Within weeks, it signed a joint digital infrastructure program with India, renewed a bilateral energy and transport agreement with South Korea, and received a $1.2 billion funding guarantee from the African Development Bank, with no political strings attached. You see, Kenya didn't collapse without U.S. money. It stood taller, on its own terms. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Number 5. Tanzania. If Kenya's line was drawn in the courtroom, Tanzania's was drawn in the laboratory. The Trump administration proposed East Africa's largest health aid package to Tanzania, valued at over $700 million. The deal included vaccine shipments, state-of-the-art medical equipment, and the construction of biotech research labs in Dar es Salaam. But the strings attached stunned the continent. In exchange, Tanzania would serve as a primary test site for experimental pharmaceutical trials from U.S. and European companies. What's more, there was no provision for legal recourse in the event of injury, death, or failed trials, nor any language granting Tanzania intellectual property rights over any successful treatment. President Samia Suluhu Hassan exposed the operation. "We welcome science. We reject exploitation," she said before Parliament. "We are not guinea pigs for your pharmaceutical laboratories. Not now. Not ever." The backlash in the West was swift. Medical journals criticized her stance. NGOs accused the government of turning away life-saving innovation. But within Africa, her decision was viewed as a watershed moment for public health sovereignty. Across African universities and think tanks, the conversation shifted. Why has Africa remained a testing ground rather than a technology hub? In response, President Hassan didn't just walk away from the deal. She built an alternative. Her government announced a partnership with the African Union's Health Strategy Center, established a biotech innovation zone with Cuban support, and launched a national grant to train African epidemiologists and bioengineers. Number 4. Algeria. Trump's administration had proposed a cutting-edge security cooperation deal with Algeria, offering access to AI-enhanced satellites, drones, and predictive intelligence software, technology that Washington boasted was unmatched. But the price? Algeria had to furnish real-time intelligence on the military and economic activities of Libya, Mali, and Niger, its neighbors. To Washington, it was strategic. To Algiers, it was treason. President Abdelmajid Tebboune took to national TV and delivered a blistering rebuke. "We are not informants, we are protectors. Algeria does not trade regional peace for power." He went further, revealing that the proposed surveillance architecture would have allowed the US to monitor all cross-border movements and share data with European partners, without Algerian oversight. Public outrage exploded. Algeria has a long history of guarding its sovereignty, especially in intelligence matters. The Algerian War of Independence remains a defining chapter in its national psyche. The idea of handing over its skies and secrets to a foreign military power triggered protests, editorials, and policy forums demanding stronger data borders. And Algeria responded not by isolating, but by integrating. It launched talks with the African Union on a Pan-African cybersecurity shield, signed a defense and data cooperation protocol with Russia, and accelerated development of its own artificial intelligence surveillance systems, all locally controlled. You see, Algeria wasn't rejecting intelligence, it was reclaiming control of it. Number 3. Senegal. By the time the Trump administration approached Senegal, it had already faced rejections grounded in oil, surveillance, infrastructure, and sovereignty. But this was different. This was about democracy itself. On the surface, Trump's offer was tailor-made to win favor. Millions in funding for democratic institutions, civil society support, and electoral reforms. It was framed as a gesture of goodwill to strengthen African democracy. But then came the leak. Internal documents from within the US State Department were exposed, memos detailing how the aid package was structured to elevate a pro-Western candidate in Senegal's upcoming election. Language like steering influence, messaging alignment, and third-party political engineering revealed a chilling truth. The funding was not about democracy. It was about manufacturing allegiance. The backlash was immediate and explosive. President Macky Sall's government responded swiftly, expelling 2 senior U.S. diplomats, suspending all USAID-related election programs under review, and demanding an official apology from Washington. But what made Senegal's response historic was the mobilization of its people. Civil society groups marched in Dakar chanting, "Our democracy, our rules." University campuses erupted in forums about foreign interference. Legal associations called for investigations into past foreign-funded NGOs operating during election cycles. And instead of folding under pressure, Senegal created a new National Electoral Integrity Commission, an independent body with oversight from the African Union, free from Western influence. Senegal didn't just reject manipulation, it put the world on notice. Africa's democracy would no longer be a testing ground for great power games. And perhaps most telling, other nations began quietly reviewing their foreign election funding mechanisms too. Senegal made it political suicide to try this again. Number 2. Angola. If Senegal's rejection was about political independence, Angola's was about economic self-respect. Trump's administration offered Angola a glittering deal: $5 billion in infrastructure investments, roads, rail, smart power grids, even a proposed tech innovation hub in Luanda. It was touted as a game changer. But buried deep in the agreement were conditions that rewrote the story. First, the investments were not grants. They were high-interest loans from the US-backed firms with limited transfer of ownership. Second, Angola was required to cancel all existing bilateral trade deals with China, particularly those involving rare earth minerals. Third, US corporations would be granted exclusive exploration rights to Angola's untapped oil fields. President João Lourenço didn't even wait for closed-door talks. At a press conference broadcast live across Lusophone Africa, he held the proposal in his hand and famously declared, "If you want exclusivity, show us the money first. Don't dress debt as liberation." His tone was razor-sharp but surgical. The US delegation couldn't meet the financial guarantees Angola demanded. They had hoped Angola's growing debt exposure would force compliance. Instead, Angola walked away. Within 72 hours, Angola announced a $3.7 billion mineral and infrastructure partnership with China, and within weeks had finalized a rare earths research agreement with Brazil, cementing its position in the non-Western camp. But this wasn't just about switching partners. Angola rejected the entire Western development model, the same one that had kept African countries indebted and dependent since the 1980s. For Angola, development would no longer come at the cost of dignity. Number 1. Egypt. Egypt has long been viewed as America's closest African ally, receiving over $1.3 billion annually in military aid for decades. U.S. military exercises, intelligence coordination, and defense sales were pillars of the relationship. So when the Trump administration proposed a renewed security pact, expectations in Washington were high. The deal included advanced military hardware, expanded joint exercises, and continued access to strategic intelligence from the Suez Canal to Libya. But there was a condition, a devastating one. Egypt had to publicly support Israel's annexation of the West Bank, breaking from its traditional support for Palestine and realigning the Arab world's center of gravity in favor of Trump's Middle East doctrine. The backlash inside Egypt was immediate. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi held an emergency meeting with senior military leaders and opposition figures. Despite their usual differences, they were united on one thing: the demand was unacceptable. El-Sisi took a hard line. "We are not for sale, not in weapons, not in politics, not in blood." The statement echoed across Arabic media. Egyptian streets lit up in protest, not against the government, but in support of its refusal to betray Palestine. The Arab League issued rare praise. Even political rivals within Egypt rallied behind the stance. But Egypt didn't stop there. It quietly finalized a military cooperation agreement with China, and later signed a naval intelligence sharing pact with Russia, making it clear that the U.S. could no longer assume automatic loyalty. This wasn't just about annexation, it was about agency. By rejecting the deal, Egypt drew a red line in the sand. No superpower could ask it to compromise its regional role or betray its principles for money. And that message hit harder than any press release. What do you think? Which country made the boldest move? Do you feel this is the start of a new Africa, one that won't be bought? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether these African countries should have declined the offer straight away or taken it and given nothing in return to Trump. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.